All right, everybody, come on in, come on in. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk with Maggie and Lucy. So good to see you all in here. Hello, Jurgen. This is where we believe the older women should teach the young, just like the late, great Kevin Samuel said. Lucy and I come here with you all from time to time to give you our perspective as older women with over 40 years of combined marriage experience. We like to react to things that hopefully we believe will help those young women who have already decided to prioritize marriage and family in their prime. So Lucy, greet everybody and let us know, what are we reacting to today?
Hi, Maggie. Hi, everyone. I think I sent you this before you went on your vacation. But it's from a great website. Again, it's character over gender, and we're going to see what the presentation is all about, and we're going to react to it.
Yeah, absolutely. We reacted to this one before. It is an animation with a voice overlay. So I think the content owner might be some type of therapist in the real world, but it's a nameless, faceless channel. The name of the video is called Some Women Blame Men for Everything Until They Need Saving. And the channel is Psych Depth. I have posted the link in the description. If you want to watch it without our commentary, you are always welcome to. And again, Lucy and I believe in marriage and family, and so that's what we promote here. If you want to do your own thing, none of this applies to you. You can go and be great. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. This one is about 25 minutes long. So we're going to watch it and then pause and react to it. We love to know you all's thoughts. We'll bring them up on the screen. Hello to everyone on Instagram and on TikTok as well. So let me share my screen and mute myself, and let's listen.
Here's a thought experiment that reveals everything wrong with modern thinking. Ask someone what scares them more: a complete societal collapse where electricity fails, food's out, and law disappears. Being alone in a room with a man, you'd think the apocalypse would win, right? But increasingly, people are saying they'd rather face the end of civilization than trust the opposite sex. Let me explain why this isn't about actual danger, but about psychological conditioning that's created a generation terrified of their own species while completely unprepared for real threats. The fear response toward men has become so exaggerated, it's actually comical. I had a client whose girlfriend would clutch her keys between her fingers walking to her car at night, terrified of attack. But she'd also text while driving on the highway. Statistically, she's about 10,000 times more likely to die from distracted driving than from a parking lot assault. But one fear feels real while the other doesn't. That's conditioning, not logic. This exaggerated fear isn't based on lived reality for most people. The vast majority have never experienced actual violence. They've experienced stories, statistics taken out of context, and endless social media posts about danger. They're living in the safest time in human history, while convinced they're in constant mortal peril. Meanwhile, their ancestors faced actual daily threats, and still managed to build civilization.
All right, I want to unpack this in the beginning. You all probably remember when that ridiculous reaction was going around where women were asked if they'd rather be alone in the woods with a bear or with a man. And as a boy mom, any of us who have men in our lives that we admire and respect, our fathers, our brothers, our sons, our nephews, our uncles, it's tragic to me. And like the content creator said, this is not anything coming from real world experience. Ask anybody who's gone through real tragedy. This is conditioning. And you can believe or not believe, but the fact remains that we are being told. Did you hear him when he said we are basically being conditioned to fear our own species? And that has a ripple effect. How are we going to survive if there is no real threat, but yet we're more afraid of each other than the world around us? How are we going to survive? How are we going to prevail? When he said our ancestors, all of us, wherever we came from, lived through real war, real famine, real natural disaster, real hunger. But instead of turning against each other, they turn towards each other, and we're all here because they didn't give up on their own species. What would you add, Lucy?
And I think I've said it before. It's the men that have created such a safe environment for us that we women think that, we can do it all by ourselves. When the world is coming down and when the apocalypse hits us, we think that we are going to be able to, you know, grab our weapons and, fight off the zombies without the man being in the front lines for us. Again, we're living in a delusion. We're living in not in the real world, and unfortunately, the more social media shares those that algorithm about women w- not needing men, it's going to get worse before it gets better for women.
For women, that is so true. We don't get into politics here, but you all saw what just happened early in November with budgets and certain benefits being cut. That wasn't even a real natural disaster, but people were losing their minds. What happens when there's a real threat? What happens when there's a real enemy at the gate? I think that man that you think is your worst nightmare may become your biggest asset. Let's go back in.
What this fear really masks is a deeper insecurity about personal vulnerability. It's easier to blame an external threat than admit you feel powerless in general. It's more comfortable to say men are dangerous than acknowledge I don't know how to protect myself, or I've never developed real strength. The fear becomes a shield against confronting personal inadequacy. The comfort dependency issue is what really exposes the contradiction. Modern lifestyles have completely separated people from primal resilience. The same individuals who claim to fear men desperately depend on male-dominated industries for survival. Who maintains the power grid? Who fixes the pipes? Who delivers the food? Who enforces the law? The overwhelming majority are men, but somehow, those providing the infrastructure of survival are simultaneously the primary threat. This identity crisis becomes glaring when imagining societal breakdown. Without electricity, running water, food delivery, law enforcement, what happens? Suddenly physical strength matters, technical skills matter, the ability to build, fix, and defend matters. And who's been developing these skills while others were developing their personal brand on Instagram? The hidden dependence becomes impossible to ignore. The contrasting instincts under pressure reveal fundamental differences in approach. When crisis hits, masculine energy typically leans toward action. See problem, solve problem, need shelter, build it, need food, hunt it, need protection, fight for it. This isn't about superiority, it's about tendency toward direct engagement with problems. Feminine energy often leans toward avoidance and emotional protection in crisis. This makes evolutionary sense. When you're potentially carrying children, risk avoidance is smart. But in modern context, this becomes paralysis. Instead of developing crisis skills, there's a tendency to hope the crisis doesn't happen or someone else handles it. Again, not universal, but an observable pattern. These different responses highlight psychological polarity that's been consistent throughout history. It's not that one approach is better, they're complementary. But pretending they don't exist or that they're purely social constructs leaves people unprepared for reality when comfortable civilization stops functioning.
All right, I want to take a moment to unpack this one because I know he said a lot there, and sometimes, I can sense modern women or maybe even modern people kind of eye rolling, like, okay, here we go with the doomsday again. But did you hear him when he said, these modern conveniences that we have, they've they were made to maybe make life a little easier for us, but they could be detrimental because those innate survival skills that we all have or we all need are almost being dumbed down because we think, oh, everything is so safe and so comfortable. And yes, we live in a very peaceful time. Watch any movie, any period piece, and you will see for hundreds and for thousands of years, people lived with the threat of war. And something very sobering I thought about recently, you know how men are always saying, or my man, Mr. President, always saying, all of this could go away at any moment. And, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, there he goes again, end of the world. But you all remember what just happened recently with some benefits being cut. Did you notice that there were other countries in the world that started making sarcastic videos about starving children in America? And I remember he always used to say, somebody's always waiting for us to slip up so they can come in and take over. And it starts with that kind of ha-ha joke. But please believe, ladies, we live in a world that is protected by the men who are vigilant, the men that are men of action, the men that are strong. If they let down their guard for real, it's over the way that we know it. So quickly, someone else is going to come, swoop in, and take up all the resources and all the wonderful things that we have here. So be very careful getting comfortable and wooed into this world where you think men are optional, because life could be very different very quickly. What would you add, Lucy?
Yeah, and unfortunately, there are many that have been so used to having this comfortable life that they say, yeah, that would never happen to us. Again, I lived in two countries where everybody said, yeah, that would never happen to us, Nicaragua and Venezuela. And, it was taken over. And the way it was taken over is they started removing the men at night, putting them in re-education camps to allow the strongest to not be the resistance. It ended up being just the women and children that stayed out, and we usually comply. We are the ones that tend to comply to whatever works for us, whatever makes us feel safer. Men are the ones that will take action and will fight back when things are not working the right way. And those are the first that the other people that are looking at us saying, hey, we want what you want, what you have. They're saying, okay, so who are the first in line that we need to get rid of to be able to take that stuff that they have without any kind of too much resistance? It's the strong men.
Absolutely, ladies. So be careful before you say how irrelevant they are. You may come to eat those words. Let's go back in.
Let me share something I observed during a recent power outage that lasted 3 days. The neighborhood dynamics shifted immediately. The same woman who posts constantly about toxic masculinity was at my client's door within hours, asking if his generator could keep her refrigerator running. She went from, I don't need a man, to please help me the moment comfort disappeared. Not because she's hypocritical, but because ideology evaporates when reality arrives. The collapse of the innocent victim myth is crucial here. We've been conditioned to see certain groups as inherently moral and others as inherently dangerous. But capacity for cruelty and manipulation exists across all human categories. I've seen people destroy lives with gossip as effectively as violence. I've seen emotional manipulation cause more lasting damage than physical confrontation. During my years of counseling, I've encountered individuals whose worst abusers were those they'd never suspect. The female boss who psychologically tortured her female employees while championing women's empowerment. The male feminist who was secretly the most controlling partner. The categories we're taught to trust or fear often have nothing to do with actual behavior. Denying aggressive capacity in any group creates social imbalance. When we pretend only certain people can be perpetrators, we blind ourselves to actual threats. The person who ruins your life might not be who you're watching for. They might be someone you'd never suspect because they don't fit the profile you've been programmed to fear. This false belief in same-gender unity and safety falls apart under examination. The notion that people automatically thrive among their own gender ignores massive evidence to the contrary. Competition, jealousy, and covert hostility often emerge in single-gender groups. Ask anyone who's worked in an all-female or all-male environment. It's not the utopia people imagine. I counsel individuals who've been betrayed, sabotaged, and destroyed by their own gender, far more often than by the opposite sex. The rivalry within groups can be vicious precisely because it's for the same resources, same recognition, same positions. Your biggest threat often comes from someone similar to you, not different from you. Consider the dynamics in any competitive environment. Who's most likely to sabotage your promotion? The colleague of the opposite sex who's in a completely different track, or the one of your same gender competing for the exact same position? Who's more likely to spread rumors about your personal life? Someone from a different social circle or someone within your own?
All right, so let's talk a little bit about this, ladies. Welcome to the sisterhood. And again, you can do whatever you want to do. I am not telling you to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we definitely need to watch for patterns of behavior. Lucy and I talked about that in the finishing school. We were talking about emotional intelligence, but ladies, we have to be able to read the room and just accept the fact that amongst women, we all want the same thing. We all want to thrive. We all want our homes and our families and our children to be more secure. So just ask yourself, when you are believing that this group over here that you know nothing about and have had no experience with is inherently bad, is it from your own lived experience, or is someone just telling you, oh, don't trust these men, or don't trust, this group? Again, we're all going to have our own lived experience, but I think it's fascinating when he said ideology evaporates when reality sets in. Find me the all female anything that has survived over time. And I'm, a girl power, that's great. But I think we're much better together. So young women, I would say it's much better for you and your husband to build your own family unit and then grow from there. Because a lot of times, girl groups, girl teams, girl whatevers, we start to fracture because ultimately it's human nature. I want what's best for me, and I'm going to chop you off at the knees if that means I can get it first. And like he said, a lot of times the most damage comes from someone who you would think, because they're more like you, would have your back, when in essence, you'd be much safer and much better off with a man that loves and protects you. What would you add, Lucy?
Oh, first, I want to thank Condemnia for that very generous chat that he sent us. Thank you so much. He says, most men think about these scenarios often, especially as we get older and start families. How will I save my family when Skynet goes live, Terminator style, zombie apocalypse, digital ID, famine, war, dystopian feudalism, etc.? We men live to save the day. Exactly. And that is what is so hard for me, just to hear these young women talking about things that they have no idea about, thinking that they are going to be the ones to save the day.
Condemnia, one of my day ones, incredibly generous. I'm sorry I missed that, but thank you for the $100 super chat. We're going to go back in, but I just came back from a cruise where I saw a aqua show, like a performance, and they were titling it. It was an all female cast, all women, girl power. Shout out to the daughters. That's great. But you know what's interesting? As I watched this show and I watched all these women doing their acrobatics, and it was wonderful. When I looked around the stage, the spotlight was on the women, but the men doing the rigging, tightening the cables, moving the lights, like all the stuff that had to happen. They didn't have the spotlight on them, but all of the things that had to happen to make this all female show go live. I remember kind of craning my head and looking around. All of them were men. So I'm just saying, ladies, just be very careful about thinking when that spotlight is on you for the moment, you can actually do it by yourself, because I would argue we probably cannot, because if we could, we would have. Thank you again, Condemnia. We're going to go back in.
The workplace violence statistics tell an interesting story that contradicts the narrative. The vast majority of workplace hostility, sabotage, and psychological warfare happens within gender groups, not between them. Yet we're programmed to fear the opposite sex while trusting our own. This misalignment between perception and reality leaves people vulnerable to actual threats while defending against imaginary ones. Real security depends on trust and character, not gender alignment. A trustworthy man is safer than an untrustworthy woman, and vice versa. But we've been programmed to see danger through gender lens rather than character lens. This leaves people vulnerable to actual predators who don't match the expected profile. Human nature itself is the source of darkness, not masculinity or femininity specifically. Evil and violence stem from human impulses that exist across all categories. Every individual carries potential for both harm and virtue. The difference isn't in the plumbing, but in the choices, values, and character development. History shows us repeatedly that when civilization's veneer cracks, surprising people become monsters, and surprising people become heroes. The quiet neighbor might become a warlord. The aggressive colleague might sacrifice themselves saving others. Crisis doesn't create character, it reveals it. And character isn't determined by gender. During the London Blitz, there were women who looted bombed houses while their neighbors were dying inside, and women who risked their lives pulling strangers from rubble. There were men who became black market profiteers exploiting suffering, and men who gave their last food to children. The crisis didn't create these choices, it revealed who these people always were. Cultural indoctrination has replaced nuanced understanding with simplistic narratives. Modern discourse teaches people to see interactions through oppressor/victim lens rather than complex human dynamics. This emotional programming fuels resentment and self-deception, while preventing genuine understanding of how relationships and society actually function. The education system reinforces these narratives from childhood. Children are taught to categorize people as safe or dangerous based on demographics rather than behavior. They learn to see group identity before individual character. By adulthood, this programming is so deep that questioning it causes cognitive dissonance. The media amplification of this programming is relentless. Every story is framed through the lens of group conflict rather than individual choice. Every crime becomes representative of a demographic rather than a person's decision. Every success or failure is attributed to category rather than character. This constant reinforcement makes the programming feel like reality, even when personal experience contradicts it. The gender propaganda serves someone's interests but not yours. While people are fighting about who's more dangerous or more victimized, actual power structures remain unchallenged. Divide and conquer is ancient strategy, and it's working perfectly. Keep the population afraid of each other and they won't notice who's actually exploiting them. Crisis situations reveal what civilization allows us to hide. When resources become scarce, when law breaks down, when survival is uncertain, ideological comfort disappears. Suddenly, competence matters more than credentials. Strength matters more than sensitivity. Loyalty matters more than likes. Reality reasserts itself with brutal clarity. I've talked to survivors of actual societal breakdowns, wars, natural disasters, economic collapses. You know what they never mention? Gender studies theories. They talk about finding water, securing food, protecting family, maintaining shelter. They talk about who stepped up and who fell apart. And it's never who you'd predict based on modern narratives. One survivor of the Yugoslav wars told me something that stuck. When the shooting started, the feminist professor and the traditional housewife both did the same thing, looked for strong men to protect them.
How about that? When the shooting started, both the feminist and the wife did the same thing. You all have heard me say it, and it's true, and it always will be true. We are not equal. We are equally valued. And what he has said about when the you know what hits the fan, it's amazing how all of these first world problems evaporate. You know, and I was thinking about all of these quirks that we have and all of this. I'm not a doctor, so I'm going to tread lightly, but all of this anxiety and allergies and all of these things, funnily enough, we didn't hear about as much of this when times were hard, when we really needed to survive, when we really needed to eat to live, when we really needed to protect ourselves and have shelter. Now, am I saying we need to give it all up and go back to the Stone Age? No, I'm not. But I am saying be very careful, like he said, about this group think. Whoever you think of it is in charge of it, there's a reason why we are to be divided. We've talked about this in previous episodes where Someone benefits when there's split households, when there is confusion, when we're turning against each other. If we turn against each other, we're going to be turning towards something. And it's that something that's going to benefit when we aren't unified. So, Kevin Samuels used to say it, we are better together. And there's no better unbreakable bond than the relationship that you create, your life mate, your husband, your wife, who's going to do this thing called life with you. So when it gets hard, ladies, you're not looking left and right trying to find somebody to bring you underneath their covering. Because Lucy has said it, 2030 is just about 4 years away, and 1 out of every 2 women is going to be single for life. What would you add, Lucy?
Yes, and again, he talks about programming. This kind of programming has been happening for, I want to say, at least 40 years. It is from cradle to almost grave. You have it in the schools. Why do you think they have programs on TV? It's because it's programming you to think something different than what your core values are. So again, it's just, I come from countries that fell under communism. And I have seen that type of programming um, create monsters. And I think for us to be in the United States, we are incredibly blessed. And it's time for us to say, we should question everything that we see, because again, the division makes money for many, and it creates chaos. And they are afraid that once we become united, they're not going to be able to deal with us. And that's what they want. They want us to be divided just so they won't have to deal with us once we become one.
Absolutely. All right, y'all, let's go back in.
Meanwhile, some of those strong men ran away while their skinny neighbours stayed and fought. Crisis doesn't care about your ideology or appearance. Another survivor from Hurricane Katrina described how the social order completely inverted within 48 hours. The yoga instructor became ruthless about hoarding resources. The construction worker shared his last water with strangers. The police officer abandoned his post while the former convict organised neighbourhood protection. Every assumption about who could be trusted was wrong. The parental instincts under threat show interesting patterns. Fathers often prioritise defence and endurance, standing ground, fighting if necessary, ensuring long-term survival. Mothers often prioritise immediate escape and emotional comfort, getting children away from danger, soothing distress. Both are valuable, both are necessary. Neither is complete alone. But we've created a culture that denies these natural tendencies. We pretend that maternal and paternal instincts are identical, that protection and nurture are the same thing. This leaves children without the full spectrum of what they need. They get half a survival strategy and wonder why they feel unprepared for life. The denial of these complementary instincts creates confused children who don't understand their own impulses. Boys who feel protective are told they're toxic. Girls who seek protection are told they're weak. Both are being denied the full range of human experience and the wisdom of evolved strategies that kept our species alive. But cultural conditioning has convinced many that one instinct is toxic while the other is pure. This leaves children without half the protection they need. A child needs both the parent who'll fight threats and the parent who'll provide comfort. Denying either aspect leaves them vulnerable. True protection comes from resilience, not just removal from danger. You can't always run from threats. Sometimes you have to stand and face them. Sometimes comfort isn't possible, and endurance is required. Preparing children for reality means teaching both aspects, not pretending one is unnecessary. The real divide in humanity isn't biological, it's moral. There are people of strong character and weak character, people who build and people who destroy, people who protect and people who exploit. These categories cross all demographic lines. Your allies and enemies aren't determined by their chromosomes but by their choices. Think about your own life experiences. Who has actually helped you when you needed it? Who has betrayed you when you trusted them? If you're honest, you'll find these people distributed across all categories. The investment banker who volunteers at the shelter, the charity worker who embezzles funds, Character transcends category. Blaming an entire gender for society's problems prevents self-reflection and personal accountability. It's easier to say, those people are the problem, than examine your own contributions to dysfunction.
I want to unpack this one because this one really hits home, and um, it bothers me, especially when we hear, I'll just say, older women. I know sometimes they get the label of being bitter older women, and that's not what this is about at all. But we have to ensure that children especially get both the mother and the father experience. And oftentimes when people have a failed relationship or a scorned relationship, we've all had our heart broken. It then turns into men are bad, don't trust men, all men, they're only going to do this to you. And it robs children of that necessary training. You all know I'm a divorcee. The boys have lived with their dad since they've been teenagers because I can't raise a man. But ladies, I think if we mess up, the best thing to do is to learn from it and share our wisdom with others. But at a minimum, you can't poison other people just because of your bad experience. I think that is really, really damaging. And we're going to create, like he said, this up and coming society of children who think that other side is unnecessary, and then they're unprepared for the real world out there. Because go to any developing country, like Lucy said, you're not going to find this confusion about the gender wars because we know we need each other. What would you add, Lucy?
And that protection from men and nurturing for women is, it's biological. I think that either you or I heard somebody said that when a woman needs her child crying and they're both sleeping in bed, the woman immediately wakes up and goes and cares for, nurtures the baby. When the man can be sound asleep. However, when the man hears something moving in the bushes, the woman is out and he's the first one to go out there and inspect. Is the protection factor. So again, it's who we are, and trying to erase that is just creating so much chaos. And it's unfortunate because again, we've lived with each other for centuries, and all of a sudden within the last 40 years, we've made each other the enemy. We need to get back to basics.
Absolutely. Let me say a kind thank you to Swab for the $10. Thank you so much. You all are so generous, and especially the men coming in to support. We're going to go back in, but what Lucy said, one of the things that really upsets me is when I see women who are misled by this group think. You really have to. That's why I tell young ladies, if you know that you want marriage and family, that drumbeat is only going to get louder as you get older. So you need to choose wisely and make decisions now that when you're our age, you will look back on and appreciate. There is a celebrity who a video just came across my page for years. She always talked about she never wanted kids. She even wanted to have the procedure to prevent her from having kids. And her doctor said, no, she was too young. She was anti-children, anti-children, anti-children for years. Then she got married and in her 40s had a child. The marriage did not last. Every single video that this woman makes now is about being a mother and how this has been so healing for her and all of these things. And I think the nerve of you, how many women followed you blindly thinking that being some type of boss babe or being some type of jet setter or whatever was going to be their path to happiness. Then you can wake up in the witching hour, and who knows if you had help or it happened naturally, now all of a sudden you're singing a very different tune. So ladies, especially young ladies, be very careful about who you let speak to you, your family members, your friends, what you consume, because they can put you down a path where you're thinking the thing that might make you the happiest is actually bad for you. And then it may get to a point where it's too late and you have to live with that regret. So just be very careful. Let's go back in.
It's more comfortable to claim victimhood than acknowledge agency. But this mentality keeps people trapped in cycles of resentment and failure. The victim mentality programming is particularly destructive because it removes agency. If you're always a victim of the opposite sex, you never have to examine your own choices, patterns, or contributions to negative outcomes. This feels protective but actually prevents growth and condemns people to repeat the same destructive patterns indefinitely. True progress requires uniting good people across all categories against corruption and weakness. The grandmother who raised her family with wisdom has more in common with the grandfather who protected his community than either has with the criminals of their own gender. Character creates deeper bonds than surface categories. Here's what's really happening. People fear men more than apocalypse because they've been programmed to see gender as threat, while being completely disconnected from actual survival skills. They're terrified of the protector while being unprepared for what they'd need protection from. It's like being afraid of the lifeguard while unable to swim. The irony is thick enough to cut. The same people who claim men are the primary danger would be desperately seeking male protection the moment real danger arrived. When the power goes out, when the food stops coming, when law breaks down, suddenly those toxic masculine traits like strength, aggression, and protective instincts become pretty valuable. I witnessed this during a violent protest that broke out near my office. The women who'd been lecturing about male violence were immediately looking for male colleagues to escort them to their cars. Not because they're hypocrites, but because when actual danger appears, reality overrides ideology. They knew instinctively who was more likely to be able to protect them physically. The same dynamic plays out in every natural disaster, every breakdown of order. The ideological positions evaporate, and biological reality reasserts itself. Not because one sex is superior, but because different capabilities become relevant in different contexts. Denying this leaves everyone less prepared and more vulnerable. I'm not saying women are weak or men are heroes. I'm saying the narrative that paints one gender as inherently dangerous and the other as inherently virtuous is not just wrong, it's dangerously naive. It leaves people unprepared for reality while focused on imaginary threats. Real preparation for crisis means developing actual skills, not just fears. Learn basic survival techniques, understand basic mechanics, develop physical capability, build genuine relationships based on trust and reciprocity. These matter infinitely more than gender when crisis arrives. The psychological damage of constant fear programming is severe. Living in perpetual anxiety about half the population, while being unable to handle actual challenges, creates a special kind of neurosis. It's learned helplessness combined with misplaced vigilance. You're watching for the wrong threats while missing real dangers. This programming creates actual physical symptoms: chronic anxiety, stress hormones, inflammation, all from fearing something that statistically isn't a threat while ignoring actual health risks. The fear itself becomes more dangerous than what's feared. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of dysfunction. The cortisol response from constant fear literally shrinks the hippocampus, impairs memory formation, and reduces cognitive function. People are making themselves dumber and less capable through manufactured fear of half the human population. The programming is creating the vulnerability it claims to protect against. Social media amplifies these fears exponentially. Every negative story gets shared thousands of times, while millions of normal interactions go unnoticed. The algorithm feeds fear because fear drives engagement. You're being programmed to see danger everywhere except where it actually exists.
You're being programmed to see danger everywhere except for where it actually exists. And this is so true. It's actually quite dangerous. We all know about the algorithm. I mean, we use social media as a tool, but it's not for no reason that one of the apps that we all used came under a lot of scrutiny because the version in this country was being served up different content than the version in another country. And believe what you want to, but there is a reason people lead with the most egregious, the worst behavior. And it's out there. We have to be willing to turn away from it. And like he said, we have to look at what we've actually experienced in the real world, because when the real, you know what, hits the fan, all of a sudden, we line up accordingly and we start trying to pair up with the people who can help us. Look at whatever just happened recently with budgets. We haven't lived in too much wartime, but there's been economic collapses. You know, the pandemic, whether you believe it or not. Whenever stressful things happen, all of this talk about so and so being the enemy goes away. So again, just be very careful about just being dumbed down with what other people want to tell you is reality. Ask yourself and look at your own life. When you walk into a space with men, when I walk into a space with men, I feel safer and more protected. Usually they're trying to help me carry something, open the door, lift something, ask if I'm okay. That's usually how men are. That's how the men that I know are. So are you just repeating what's been told to you, but you don't have any real world experience? And how is that hindering you in having a real relationship? What would you add, Lucy?
I agree, and I think that this programming has happened for so long that I don't know if the younger generation is going to be able to understand this call to action, call to say, you know what, let's get back to biology and let's get back to understanding a person's character before you say that they're a bad person because of their gender. So again, it's one of those things. It's really interesting. Yeah, we use social media. We could use social media for good, but at this point, social media is being used for a reason, and um, not on a positive side, but to make us more stressed. Again, I think that I don't know if you believe in whoever you believe, but I think that in the Bible, there's discussion about evil. The devil wants chaos. The devil wants confusion. The devil wants fear. All of these things that are being given to us on a daily basis, it's for a reason. And and it creates chaos, and chaos makes money for a lot of people.
Absolutely. So, yeah, ladies, just audit your entertainment. We talked about that in the finishing school. When you come away from a space, from a show, from a friend group, from a family member, do you feel like you're a better version of yourself or a more stressed out version of yourself? Let's go back in.
Consider this. If men were actually as dangerous as the narrative suggests, civilization couldn't exist. Cooperation between genders has been essential for human survival throughout history. The fact that we built complex societies proves that most people, regardless of gender, are basically cooperative and decent. The real tragedy is how this fear prevents genuine connection. How many potential friendships, relationships, and collaborations are destroyed by programmed fear? How many people live in isolation because they've been taught to see danger in half of humanity? The social cost is immeasurable. Children are growing up in this environment of manufactured fear. Boys are being taught they're inherently dangerous. Girls are being taught they're inherently victims. Both are being robbed of the chance to see each other as full humans with complex potential. This psychological damage will echo for generations. I see the effects in young adults who can't form healthy relationships. They approach each other with suspicion instead of curiosity, fear instead of interest. They're so worried about being hurt that they never truly connect. The programming has created a generation incapable of the vulnerability required for genuine intimacy. The competence crisis is real. While people argue about gender, practical skills are disappearing. Fewer people can fix things, build things, grow food, provide medical care, defend themselves. We're becoming a society of dependents, arguing about who's more oppressed while losing the ability to actually survive. Here's a practical test. Next time you feel that programmed fear response, ask yourself, what actual evidence do I have for this specific threat? Not statistics, not stories, not what you've been told. What have you personally experienced? For most, the answer reveals how much of their fear is borrowed rather than earned. The solution isn't to be naive about real dangers. Bad people exist across all categories. The solution is to assess threat based on behavior and character, not demographic categories. Learn to read actual warning signs rather than assumed ones. Develop real capabilities rather than just fears. Build genuine relationships across difference. The best way to break fear programming is through actual experience with real people. When you know decent people from all backgrounds, the narrative that any entire group is dangerous falls apart. Reality is the best antidote to propaganda. Develop actual crisis skills. Learn first aid, basic mechanics, food production, self-defense. Not because the apocalypse is coming, but because competence creates confidence. When you know you can handle real problems, imaginary threats lose their power. The skill development issue goes deeper than just practical abilities. It's about developing judgment, resilience, and adaptability. These meta skills matter more than specific techniques. The person who can accurately assess situations, adapt to changes, and persist through challenges will survive regardless of the specific crisis question: who benefits from your fear? When you're afraid of half the population, who gains power? When people are divided against each other, who profits? When you're focused on gender warfare, what are you not paying attention to? The answers might surprise you. The most resilient communities throughout history have been those where people of all types work together based on shared values and mutual respect, not segregated by category but united by character, where competence is valued regardless of its source, where protection is mutual rather than one-sided. Look at frontier communities, military units, emergency response teams, anywhere that actual danger exists and must be faced. You'll find men and women working together based on capability and trust.
I want to unpack that for a moment because I was just thinking as he was talking about the dating landscape now, which is, as I hear, a hot mess. Lucy and I have been out of it for decades. But when we have this fear that he said, is it real or borrowed fear? I love that. I've heard it in some church circles, the acronym FEAR, 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 false evidence appearing real. But we're so caught up in this fear of our own species that we have lost the ability to actually make discerning decisions based on evidence. Who have you actually reenacted to? We have so many women. I remember Kevin Samuels used to ask that when he would talk to younger women, and they would talk about men almost like it was the boogeyman, right? Like he was going to do something to you. And he was like, you're so young. How do you have this much fear? Well, I heard, or I saw, or my mom said, or my auntie, or I know somebody that got left or got their heart broken. So be very careful about that, ladies. Look at what you've actually experienced and compare it to what you've heard, because where we're going is people are going to be unable to couple up. Because, like we said in the finishing school, being able to have a conversation, being able to be vulnerable, to just look somebody eye to eye and talk about your experiences, even if we agree to disagree. Like I said in class, this is becoming a lost art, but that's where relationships start. If we can't have a conversation and get to know each other, I'm going to be on this side, you're going to be on that side, and we're just going to be, I guess, hooking up through Hinge or whatever you all are doing now. But the ripple effect of that is dangerous, because without these relationships, where goes our community and our society? And if you think, okay, what's the big deal? That's fine. Give it time. We'll be here or not saying the same thing. And you'll look up 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And is that the life that we want to create? So it's really important to be able to connect with the opposite sex. There's no guarantee, but if we don't turn this around, we know what's going to happen, and it's not good. What would you add, Lucy?
Yes, and I think that right now the younger women, young ladies, start looking at all that social media and all that propaganda as something that is not beneficial for you. I'm telling you, we are better together. Men and women are better together. Men and women are better creating families. Bringing up the your kids. Sometimes now schools are getting really. Shady right now, and then maybe you decide to homeschool your children. What better thing for you to spend all your time with your children, giving them those values that you have as a husband and wife in your home, the family, then it's community, then it's society. So, all of those shows, all of those influencers that speak badly about the other side, you got to question. You got to question, consider the source, like Maggie says. What do they have that they can show me that's really, what they're saying is true? When you go out there, is that the treatment that you get from the opposite side? So again, look at reality first, and don't mind social media. Social media is created as propaganda at this point.
Absolutely. And be careful. Like I said, they will switch up on you as soon as it benefits them. Let's go back in.
Not ideology. When survival is actually at stake, the luxury beliefs disappear immediately. If society actually collapsed tomorrow, the gender wars would end immediately. Survival doesn't care about your ideology. Reality doesn't accommodate narrative. The people who make it are those who can adapt, cooperate, and contribute, regardless of their demographic category. The fear of men while being unprepared for actual crisis is a luxury belief. It's something people can only maintain while protected by the very civilization they critique. Remove that protection, and the fear hierarchy reorganizes around actual threats very quickly. This doesn't mean accepting bad behavior from anyone. It means being realistic about where threats actually come from and what preparation actually means. It means developing judgment based on individual character rather than group membership. It means building strength rather than just broadcasting fear. The path forward requires honesty about human nature, both its dangers and its potential. Most people are decent most of the time. Some people are dangerous some of the time. The categories that predict danger aren't the ones we've been programmed to fear. They're about character, choices, and circumstances. Real safety comes from competence, community, and character judgment. Not from fearing entire demographics, not from ideology, not from hiding behind civilization while critiquing those who maintain it, but from developing actual capabilities and relationships that transcend superficial categories. The next time someone claims they fear men more than societal collapse, recognize this as a symptom of deeper disconnection. They've been separated from both human nature and natural reality. They're living in a narrative that serves someone's interest, but not theirs. The truth is that in actual crisis, good men and good women work together for survival. They protect each other's children. They share resources. They combine strengths to overcome challenges. This is how humanity survived everything nature threw at us, and it's how we'll survive whatever comes next. But this requires breaking free from programming that sees danger in gender rather than character. It requires developing actual skills rather than just anxieties. It requires building bridges rather than walls. Most importantly, it requires seeing each other as complex humans rather than simple categories. The fear narrative is falling apart as more people recognize its absurdity. You can only claim that half of humanity is dangerous while depending on them for survival for so long, before the contradiction becomes obvious.
So, yes, ladies, we are running out of time with this foolishness. If you are one of those who thinks that we don't need men, we can do it all on our own, just give it time. Or as we say in the South, just keep living. Because, I'm not a doomsday type of person, but it's only a matter of time before there is another threat, a real threat. And, I was thinking about this as he was speaking. Who isn't worried and who isn't complaining? I'll speak for us, our students who are happily married and tucked away. A lot of times women think, well, because you don't see them and you don't hear from us, we don't exist. No. When you think about dangers, or I remember Kevin used to talk about during the COVID times, the men would go to the grocery store and tell the women, no, you stay at home. I'm going to go cover up and I'll go brave whatever is out there. Ladies, you want to make sure that you are secure in your position before the worst happens, because when the worst happens, it's too late. And again, we are ringing the bell to let you know it's going to get worse before it gets better. And it's hard to find someone that you can do life with. So when you have an opportunity, take it seriously. Do not waste your best years thinking that it's going to be, warm and wonderful forever. The only reason we have survived, like he said, for generations is because our ancestors, all of them, when times got hard, they worked together, and we're here because of that. Because, like he said, if men were as terrible as people want you to believe, society would not have even made it this far if half of us were just pure evil. What would you add, Lucy?
Yes, and it's a shame because, as older women, me as an older woman, I have seen, I have seen natural disaster, I have seen, civil war, and I have seen the true character of men. And what you young ladies here in the Western world, in the United States, you are only shown one um, side that benefits a few people. If you start looking out there, and your life will change. I am telling you, your behavior and your attitude, it's going to be changing once you start being curious about the other side, about watching them and say, oh, that's interesting, they all gather together and they have, all these, conversations. They're loud, but we on the other side, we're supposed to be soft and delicate, and play with, teacups, and do all of our female wonderful lady things. And there's a reason for it, and it has worked for all of these years. And again, I want to say it again, we need to get back to basics.
We're only able to do those wonderful lady things because the men have secured the world around us. Believe me, when they say enough is enough, you don't want to be out here uncovered. Let's go back in and wrap it up.
Reality has a way of asserting itself despite our best efforts to deny it. What we're witnessing isn't really about gender at all. It's about the collapse of rational thinking in favor of emotional manipulation. It's about replacing practical competence with ideological compliance. It's about dividing people who should be united against actual threats to human flourishing. The antidote is simple, but not easy. Face reality, develop competence, judge individuals by character, build genuine relationships, question narratives that divide rather than unite, prepare for actual challenges rather than imaginary ones, and recognize that the person next to you, regardless of their category, might be your greatest ally or worst enemy based on their choices, not their chromosomes. Because when the lights go out, when the food stops coming, when civilization's mask slips, the gender wars will seem like the luxury they always were. What will matter is who can be trusted, who can contribute, who will stand with you when standing is hard. And those people exist across all demographics, waiting to be recognized by those with eyes to see character rather than category. The real question isn't why women fear men more than the apocalypse. It's why we've allowed ourselves to be programmed to fear each other more than the actual challenges facing humanity. And more importantly, what we're going to do about it. I want to hear from you. What programmed fears have you recognized in yourself?
All right. So, yes, I think we've stressed the point here. You all have definitely shared your thoughts, but in a nutshell, there is a reason why we are being encouraged to be distracted by the boogeyman that 9.9 times out of 10 doesn't exist. Societies grow when families grow and people couple up for life, and husbands and wives make sons and daughters. And again, we always say, if you want to do your own thing, none of this applies to you. But ladies, I would definitely encourage you to prioritize it now, because there's nothing better than not having to worry how you're going to survive. And I know a lot of people were talking about these benefits or whatever that went away for a few weeks, but that was just a blip in time. Imagine if there were a real famine or a real power outage or any of these things. I'm like a lot of you all. I used to hear the men thinking about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, come on. Nobody's really watching us waiting to pounce, until I started seeing those commercials from other countries making fun of us. Eat all the food on your plates, children. There are starving kids in America. And we basically had to sit and take it because we've had the power position for so long, looking down our nose at other countries. And then when something happened just like that, Women are now scrambling, trying to figure out how they're going to get food on the table. And let that be a warning. Just like people are watching to make fun of us, people are also watching to take advantage of us. And
Yep.
I'm not trying to scare anybody, but it is real. That is the world that we live in, and we are better together. All right. What would you say to close us out, Lucy?
I think this was a great discussion. Thank you, Maggie, for sometimes putting the more challenging portions of these videos into more conceptualized or real world uh, examples. Again, I can tell you that I've had real world examples on how the world could come to an end, and it's not fun. And it's always uh, for the earthquake in Nicaragua in 1972. There were we lived near the cemetery. There were truckloads of people coming in that had not made it. And it was the men, doing all the hard work, trying to cover us from seeing this, because once the structures were, the earthquake hit this, we couldn't go back into the house. So we needed to be outside looking at that stuff happening. And they were baking, tents and everything for us, for the children and the women, to be protected from not seeing something like that. So again, I have seen it. I've gone through David, the hurricane in Miami. When after the hurricane, all the power lines were down, all the trees, there was water everywhere. Who was out there with trucks and chainsaws and all of that stuff, going out there, cutting the trees, putting the lines back up, making sure that nobody stepped on the wrong place? It was the men. We women were in I remember we were inside the house getting, the stuff that had gone bad because the electricity had gone, making sandwiches for them, taking care of the inside. And the men were out there working their butts off to get society back to normal. So again, when I see all these young women um, saying that there is no need for a man, I can tell you otherwise, because I've lived it, I've seen it, and they do come through with action and not words.
Absolutely. Like he said, that ideology evaporates when the real world hits. So, another good one. Thank you all so much. Let me say thank you so much to those of you all who you support us all the time just by being here. But special thanks to Suave D for the $10 and our stream sponsor, Condemn, one of my day ones, for coming through with the $100 super chat. We just hope that what we share as older women is helpful for the young women. We want you to make decisions that you will be proud of when you're our age. So we will be back. We should be back next week, same time, special day for me. Stay tuned, ladies. We do it once a year. This coming Friday, Black Friday, we usually have a 50% off sale for the finishing school, which may be the last time for a while. So just be very mindful of that. We will be posting and sharing. But if you're interested in getting the private coaching with Lucy and I, you may have one more opportunity before we take some time to focus on family. All right, everybody. So with that, we will say adios.
Adios.